Hi, welcome back to Stock Talk. This is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. So it looks like a lot of people have come back from vacation. I got plenty of stock requests this week. So we're going to handle that. And I'm going to do a brief lesson at the beginning. And I do want to talk about MACD and the relationship it has with ADX and price. So let's just look at the agenda for today and really kind of give the reason why I love this indicator. There's a special part, the way I use it anyway, where I think it can give you an edge and give you confirmation on the price side, but also when you use it in relationship in multiple time frames in relationship to ADX, it can give you an edge on entry. So we're going to do that, and I'm going to go through all the stock requests that came through. So let's go ahead and get into this lesson now. Okay, I got two charts up. On the left is the weekly chart, and on the right is the daily chart of MUSA, Murphy USA. And I want to focus in on this last pullback. I actually had a question that was discussed over the last few weeks. I think it might have been 2 weeks ago during this pullback, and kind of what was taking place here in terms of what the entry would be and how to play this. And so I want to focus in on the MACD because I think in using MACD in this situation, it gives you an edge over ADX. And so first, let's start with the bigger time frame. So we get this move to the upside, and we have confirmation MACD makes a new high here, as well as a strong move in ADX. Now, this is actually more important to me, that this is making a strong move well above 25. But I do like to have the confirmation of MACD hitting a new high. But when I have a strong ADX condition in place, I know I'm interested in buying a pullback. All right. Now, sometimes that pullback takes a little bit more time to get going, and other times it can get up and going right away like it did here. So what I mentioned a few weeks ago is that there were two entries, and if you were going to play the quicker entry, that you'd give it a little bit more room, simply because we don't know sometimes when MACD overruns like this that maybe it's going to come down, test again, and then take off. And but I made it pretty clear that this would be an entry on this pullback turning back up would be an entry, but you give it here. Instead of giving it down to here, you give it more room. All right. So if you didn't see that, you might want to just go back and take a peek at that and bring you up to speed. But what I want to talk about today is the fact that this pullback here is an option, meaning you have the ability to take this trade. It's one of your choices when you use MACD, but it really isn't a choice if you're using ADXDI. And let me just explain why. If you notice, when this moved off the low, the MACD actually moved up above its signal line, and then during this pullback, it pulled back and held the signal line during this pullback. All right. If you look at what green DI did, it rallied up, and during the pullback, it overran the red DI. Let me just zoom in on this so you guys can see it. So we can see that the MACD held during the pullback, but green DI could not get, well, first of all, it didn't get above 25, but then it also dropped down under the red DI, did not hold that, and then didn't turn back up until way back in here. So when I look at it this way, I can see this pullback and this turn back up, and it really could have been, I mean, an aggressive entry. We've been taking that high. You might have let that close, and then maybe you had an inside bar, and then maybe taking out the high of this bar. Could have been another entry. But those are all available to you because of MACD. They're not available if you're using DI. In most cases, if you're watching. So let's just bring you up to speed with this, because if you think about it, you've got a strong move to the upside and a pullback. ADX is very strong, but during the decline phase, we've got red not showing any real strength to the downside, but we don't have green kicking in again. So if you wanted to wait for green to kick in, you'd have to wait for this breakout here, moving up, and hopefully you get a pullback, and in some cases you don't really get one. So I like to look at the MACD, and what I say when we get overrun in the zero line. So if you notice, we overran the zero line. What I'm always looking for is a test. I don't typically want to just turn and buy the first crossover like this. This is not an optimum entry if you've overrun zero, in my opinion. What I want to see is a little bit of a test and see this line hold just like it did, and then it tested and it turned back up. This is ideal entry with pretty high probability, and the reason why is that we've already broken the downtrend line, and now we've got 2. And now we're turning up as 3, so turning up here for 3. But as I've said in the past, I really want to be buying during 2 and the upturn from 2. And this is where MACD comes in really handy. I want to be a buyer on the upturn from 2. All right. I'm not going to buy on the way down. I'm not going to buy most times I'm not going to just buy this cross, especially after you've been up 4 or 5 days in a row. And I try to stay away from this move here, up here at 3. It tends to be a little bit late. And if you notice, you're up 1, 2, 3, off the low. You've made a pretty big move off the low. So this is ideal for me. I like this entry here in most cases. And when you have, and you don't have MACD overrun, you can put a stop right here. Right? But in this case, you still can take the trade using a stop here. But the only reason why you have this really available to you, at least with momentum confirmation, is with MACD. You don't have it in ADX. And I'm just telling you, this relationship between these two happens all the time during these pullbacks, these 1, 2, 3s. This is where MACD becomes very, very valuable. All right? I mean, there are a few other times when MACD is really helpful, and I'm not going to minimize those. You can see where during the decline phase we have a divergence as this makes a dramatic new low. We're getting a little bit away from the zero line, and we get a double bottom test while this makes a dramatic new low. It's a pretty good divergence coming up through 175. That's a pretty good signal. And then if we move up, look at how far away this gets from the zero line to the upside. We get divergence at the peak here where it does not confirm, and then that's where we think the odds are favoring this working its way back down to the zero line again. So then we start the process all over again. Now this is starting to move. Now we're looking for divergence as this gets stretched away. But for that to happen, this is probably going to need to pull back and then go again, and the MACD would not confirm on the way back up. That's how you'd get divergence at this point. Right now, we have confirmation on the upside, very strong ADX, very strong MACD, and we're looking for a pullback on the daily, probably back towards this breakout zone as a next potential entry point. But hopefully this makes sense. You understand why the MACD can be so valuable at a turning point. It's going to be a little bit quicker because MACD and the DI lines can have a little lag to them when there's some volatility or the selling was a little harsh. As long as we can get that test of the low, I think the MACD comes in really handy. All right, let's go ahead and get into the stocks now and do some analysis. Just briefly, my services can be found at RabilStockResearch.com. The individual package has 2 to 3 reports each week, plus a special video for that package. If you have an interest in trying the service, you can use a coupon code StockTalk and get the first 2 months for $50. Let's go ahead and get into the stocks now. So the first request that I had was the ARK Innovation Fund. So instead of doing an index this week, I'm going to just do this to start. And I'm going to talk about Tesla since they just came out with earnings. And then I'm going to go through the rest of the stock requests. Again, I had a lot that came through. I'm going to get through, should be able to get through just about all of them. But let's go ahead and get going on this. And what I'm doing on these first 2 is I'm giving you a different look. I've got a 18 MA in 4 different time frames, and that's it. I've got the volume at the bottom, but then basically just got the 18 because I want you to think in these terms. I want you to understand in terms of thinking in multiple time frames. I think this is kind of like a little mini lesson on it. So if you notice this fund in 2017, the 18-month turned up, and it had stayed positive until the beginning of this year. And that line turned down. So on a long-term trend, the trend was up until the beginning of this year, and now the trend is down on a long-term basis. With that said, there are times when you get really stretched away, and you could even argue that it was back in here, but definitely here and now here, where we're getting stretched away from the 18. And when that happens, we think we should get some kind of reversion back to the line. And I think we're at one of those stages because notice how we came into some pretty big support here. So we've made this plunging move to the downside, and now we've reached pretty good support. We've got a lot of distance between price and the 18 MA. So that's a long-term basis. Now, on a short-term or an intermediate-term basis on the weekly, also notice when this turned down here at the beginning of 2022, look at where this was in 2022. We had this going down, and these two lines have been down, and price has been below both the whole year, all the way down. There's been no reason to want to get long. I mean, there have been a few short opportunities on the daily chart off of these declining trends. On the bigger trends, you could have shorted to play, you know, these kind of legs, but there hasn't been anything to go long yet. Now, we're trying to get through the 18-week. If you notice, we finally are holding the 18-day. We came down, that line kind of tried to turn around, but then we failed at it. Tried to turn, failed, tried to turn. Now we held it here, okay? And that was proven by this turn here on the hourly this time. So we had two time frames holding the 18 at the same time. That's essentially the pinch play. It's a 2 time frame pinch play on MACD. But what I want to point out here is that the daily has turned up, but we're not quite through this time frame. And one of the things we need to see take place is we got to break the downtrend line. Now I think we need to push up a little bit and then form some kind of a 2, preferably holding the 18, which is cupping around. Hold that line like we did on the daily, and then we can expect a better move to the upside. So I'm of the opinion that this is probably getting ready for some kind of an intermediate term rally, not a long-term rally, intermediate term rally to work up and be a reversion back towards the 18-month line. So I think there's some opportunities coming in this. Right now, I don't really like this little breakout because we're running right into the 18-week, which is declining. So I want to see that get exceeded and then maybe look to buy the next pullback if I want to trade it as a trade back to the 18-month line. So that's how I want to think there. Now, on Tesla, the difference here, this is breaking out. You see this daily trying to turn around. Do you see how we've got room up to 820? Before we hit the 18-week, and then the 18-month is up at 824, 825. So we've got some room to roam to the upside, but it is a trading play counter trend. And what scares me a little bit about this is that I could see this, people buying this breakout pattern, thinking, oh, wow, this is just breaking out, and then they get hit, and then it gets hit here, and then it does the reverse of a undercut pattern, where, you know, we look for these undercuts where we undercut support. In this case, it breaks out and looks like it's going up, but it up thrusts and fails and then turns back down at the 18. So we got to be careful. I don't have a problem if you're willing to trade this, but make sure you're taking some profits at the 18-week. Move your stop to a point where you're not going to lose a whole lot if it fails at the 18-week. And then if it gets through the 18-week, you're home free. But make sure you do a little trimming up there if you want to try and play this move. I think right now, because there's a lot of indecision going on, we have a declining 18-week, we have a flat 18-month. Yeah, the daily's improving, but you know it's hard to hold our hat on that, hang our hat on that one. I think, you know, you got to be really careful as this works up towards 820. All right. I want to switch over. I want to look at our 4 charts as I normally do. I'm going to start with this BYND. So this is a little different because we've got the same thing going on where we're stretched below the 18-month to the downside. We've got this room to rally, okay? But on a weekly chart, we are in the process of already breaking the downtrend line. So if I just draw this in just so you can see, we are breaking the downtrend line and we're getting back above the 18-week line. What I want to see, though, is some kind of a test of this low. Would it be better if it came up and hit the 40 and then came back and tested an 18 that's cupping around? Yeah, I like that better. But if you notice at the low, we did have divergence here. And that's the same thing that happened in the ARK fund, actually. There was divergence at the low that gave you a little bit of a heads up that we were probably going to turn around. So that is happening here on this time frame. Now, if you notice on a daily chart, we've already turned the trend. We had a 1, 2, 3 that broke out back here around 27, 28, and that gave us this room to move up towards the 18-week. Now we're exceeding the 18-week, but we need to get a better setup here to play it into the monthly. I hope this is making sense. Learning how to trade in multiple time frames took me a long time to truly understand. I'm trying to make this as simple as possible. Hopefully this makes sense to you, but getting through the 18 and then holding the 18 tells you want to look for the next higher time frame as a target. So we have the potential here to get into the mid 80s, not necessarily the mid 80s, because this is going to drop, but we have some room for this to really rally, but there's more work to be done here. We don't have a 2 and we don't have a 3 yet on this time frame. Okay, HYG. So this is a high yield corporate bond fund. It's coming into support. I do think it's pretty oversold. We're below a declining 18-week. We haven't broken the downtrend line. I don't see any real divergence yet. I mean, I could see this just because of how far it's dropped. I could see this. It looks like it's kind of tired of going down, but I don't know that it's really ready to turn up. I would expect more sideways consolidation here. Probably doesn't go to a new low right away, but I also don't expect any kind of real upside move at this point until we get maybe a little bit better consolidation take place. So the question I had on Qualcomm is, what takes this from being on a watch list to being an actual buy? And I think it depends on your strategy, because when I look at this, I have a flat 18-month line here, and I've got a flat 18-week that we're getting back above. I mean, there's minor signs of improvement, but when I look at it, I'm kind of thinking trading range. We had an undercut here, and we're getting back above, but we've got some resistance overhead as we work our way up. So I would look at this as a trade, you know, from down here to say 175, but I'm going to have to do that on this time frame to make it worth my while, because let's say I get in at 150 and I put a stop in here, what is that, 120, or that's 30 points. By the time you get 30 points, I mean, it's just not great risk reward playing it off the weekly chart. But if we get a pullback here and we can get better risk control in place and then play it for a move up into the resistance, that's really, I think, how I would play this. But the reality is this isn't a stock that I would highlight because it doesn't meet criteria that I'm looking for a trending play. Unless you're looking at the daily chart, you're starting to see signs of improvement. Other than that, it's really just range bound. You use the higher time frames to tell you how much room you have. O'Reilly is it's got a better trend. It's got a rising 18-month. It's back above the weekly lines, but this was a pretty big selling bar. You see this big selling bar? And I know we're through the midpoint of that, but we're not through the high of it. I think 700 is probably going to provide some resistance here. And what I think I would look for in this one is, yeah, maybe it gets to 700, but then look for a higher bottom to show up on the weekly chart where it holds the 18 pulling back. Maybe MACD forms a little pinch and holds, that type of thing. That would be the next setup in this I'd be on the lookout for. If it just goes straight up from here, I would think it'll run out of gas at 75 and then form a pretty big trading range. Royal Bank of Canada. So we've got this pullback that's causing an overrun in MACD. And that doesn't bother me that much because the ADX is very strong, right? I mean, we've got strong ADX, we've got some overrun. So what do I say? I said this in the lesson. What I'm looking for in most cases is some kind of move up and then a test coming back down most of the time. But I don't even have a trigger now. I've got a downtrend line in place here below the 18-week. I've got a lot of overrun. Okay, so if I've got overrun, I don't take the trend line break. I've got to get a test and then turn back up. And if we can get MACD to turn and hold the signal line, that's really where I'd be looking for this. But it's probably a month or two away from setting up that way. You can keep it on a watch list because the monthly looks okay, but we're going to need a little bit more proof on the weekly chart before we can commit any capital, all right? Okay, so Google is below its 18-month line. Zero in. That line is still rising. It has not flattened out yet. So if we can get a move back to the upside that shows some strength in it, that would be encouraging. What I don't like is look at the weekly, and the momentum was actually pretty strong. By the time this actually bottomed, we got pretty good strength in the red selling strength based on this ADX reading. So I'm not I wouldn't really be interested in buying a quick turnaround in this. I actually think there's going to be some pretty significant resistance overhead, up in this region, probably around 125 or something like that. That's assuming that it can actually get through the 18-week. I would not be looking to commit new capital here. We've got a declining 18-week, and we have this sideways pattern with no strength whatsoever in the daily. If the daily were to come back down through this trend line here, let me draw the trend line in. That if we break that trend line to the downside, that reinitiates the move to the downside on the weekly based on this ADX. So there's nothing to do here. I mean, this would actually be a potential trading short if it took out this trading, this trend line that I've got drawn in. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think there's enough going wrong here that I would be pretty concerned about this. I would actually consider trimming this if I were in it longer term, like I got in it. This is the first real sell signal that we've had in this when you look at it on a monthly and a weekly in years. So it hasn't actually caused, we don't actually have the sell signal unless we break that trend line I drew in, but definitely worth noting. INMD, big drop to the downside, finding support on the monthly chart, starting to cup around and shows some signs of improvement getting through the 18-week. We already got through the 18-day, and both of those lines are turning up. So on a daily chart, you're actually in an uptrend above a rising 18-day, which is above a rising 40. You see the momentum is good. The ADX is going up. The MACD lines are both above the zero line. I mean, that trend is up. This trend is really broken but deeply oversold and pretty far away from the 18-month line. This one's trying to turn around, but it's early, and we don't have enough proof that it's really going. So let it push a little bit higher. Look to buy a next weakness. That could cause this to form an ABC kind of retracement, and that would be the next real legitimate buying opportunity. I mean, if you didn't get in down here, your next buying opportunity is a legitimate pullback on the weekly chart, I think. So MOS, and if you go through and look at a lot of the specialty chemicals as well as a lot of the agricultural chemicals, they came down really hard. Look at how violent the pullback was. But look at what we've done. We've come all the way back to the 18-month. We've come back to some pretty good support on this time frame. And the momentum condition on the monthly is still pretty good. So I actually think this is a trading play back up to 58, 59, 60, something like that, because we're oversold. Look at how far away we are from the 18-week. I mean, I think there's a trading play. The other thing I want to mention is look at what's going on here. Always keep an eye on MACD for this. So we're making a higher bottom in price, and we're making a lower bottom in MACD. This is a reverse divergence. The MACD line, I'd like to see the ADX actually get a little bit lower, but it is below. It is down to 20. So I think this could be considered for a trading play. But obviously, if you're going to do that, you have to be down on the smaller time frame. So how will we go about doing that? You got to let this pull up, maybe hit the 40, come back and hold the 18, and then, look for entry down on the, maybe even on the hourly to play this for a trade back up to the 18-week. That's all I see in this right now. I think this is more of a trading range stock on a bigger picture. I could see it working up towards 60, maybe failing, maybe even getting a little bit higher than that, and then working its way back down. So there is a potential trade here, but you got to be pretty nimble, I think. Okay, JBHT. So, deep pullback that overran the 18, but the 18 is still rising. Okay, so the key again, this is very similar to a few other stocks that we've looked at, and actually what I described in the MACD lesson was when MACD overruns on the week, on the higher time frame, the monthly chart, normally you're looking for some kind of a move up and then a pull back. But in this case, we don't really have any entry at this point because there's so much overrun in the MACD. So what I would do is make this push up and form and let the 18-week cup around, test and hold it. Then I'd be willing to take a harder look at this. And then at that point, we want to see what it looks like on the monthly chart. But it's going to take a little bit of time. I would think it's going to be about a month, 6 weeks out. Certainly worth looking at if it takes place that way. But there is a significant amount of I want to point this out, actually. This is pretty blatant. You see how we had failure here, support here, support here, and failure here. I mean, this is just a really key level, right around 180, 185. I mean, there's nothing to do below that line. This is such a key level. It's failed twice. It found support there twice and then failed again here. Very, very pivotal level. I would not get long below that line. All right. NIO. Okay, so this is trying to form a bottom. You notice how this broke the downtrend and is now testing the 18 on the weekly chart. We have some room up to the 18 months. So this could be an intermediate term trading play if we can get a setup, maybe a zero line reversal, opposing trend trigger with low ADX, something like that. We could actually do this right now based on the way it's set up. You could draw a trend line here, and if it breaks through the trend line with the zero line and low ADX, that is a buy from that standpoint. Okay, well, that's it for today. Thanks for joining me. If you have an interest in my research, check out RabilStockResearch.com. Also, if you have any stock requests, send it to stocktalk@stockcharts.com. All right, have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, Grayson Rose here with StockCharts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, consider giving it a like down below, maybe leave us a comment, and if you're new to the channel, you can subscribe at the link up above. We're gonna bring you daily content from an incredible collection of technical analysts and financial experts.